there's a lot of sensory processing there that might trigger, oftentimes, that may trigger high anxiety levels that kind of create a cognitive shutdown and don't allow folks to put their best foot forward. So I would say that interview process and allowing folks to maybe kind of having a couple of different interview journeys, and allowing folks to choose their own adventure is something that we can explore in greater detail as an industry.
Choose your own adventure. That's that harkens back to my childhood. I loved those books, and I would read every potential adventure. I'm probably not the only one, but you know. Well, welcome everyone to this episode of the Small Talk Window podcast, where we have a small window of time to dispense with the small talk as quickly as possible and settle into a meaningful conversation around the world of work. And my guest today is Ashlie Collins, who is Director of Solutions at Jovio. Welcome, Ashlie.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast. We have a very interesting topic today to discuss. It's around neurodiversity, and we're going to get into that. We're going to get into that very quickly soon, but in keeping with Small Talk Window, we're going to do a little small talk first. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Ashlie. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. Been in the world of work space for, just over 20 years now. Hate to admit that. And I think one of my many passions is travel and people. I am a hobby anthropologist because that can be a thing, but recently repatriated to the US after living in the UK for 6 years, which was just an amazing experience. And most of my free time these days goes to my 3 kiddos and all of their passions. So I'm a professional sideline cheerleader for my babies.
A professional chauffeur probably as well.
God.
I think we were
PA, chauffeur, chef, you name it. We got it.
That's awesome. We have a great topic today, and I know that one of your passions, and we're going to get into this, is neurodiversity. In my opinion, I think it's the most intriguing form of diversity.
Yeah. It keeps me busy learning new things and digging deeper and deeper for compassion for others every day.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing I like about it is that it helps us emphasize that diversity can apply to the mind as well. And this isn't just about people along the spectrum, as it's called, because autism is one example, a really good example of neurodiversity. Say you have someone who's suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, though. PTSD runs along its own spectrum, I've learned. It's another form of neurodiversity. And that's one of the things we're kind of going to get into today. So maybe let's start off. Can you give us some examples of neurodiversity and how the neurodiverse can be especially valuable assets to an employer?
Yeah, sure. And I think the place I always like to start with this conversation is really kind of clarifying between neurodiversity and neurodivergence, because neurodiversity is really something that just kind of is. It exists. If you are a human being, you have a central nervous system. It's been heavily influenced by your lived experiences, and that's where it really starts to branch out into sort of acquired conditions like PTSD, and some of the other sort of external factors that can alter how your central nervous systems run to make you more susceptible to things like anxiety, etc. Whereas neurodivergence is it is being sort of an outlier, if you will, from a neurotypical person. And I think as you rightly mentioned, I'd say the most talked about forms of that, particularly in the world of work at the moment, are autism and ADHD. I think still widely misunderstood. But there are also things like sensory processing disorder that oftentimes goes along with things like autism and ADHD. You've got dyslexia. And then you have the impacts of mental health on how you show up in your day-to-day life. I think and you hate to sort of pigeonhole any one set of strengths that can come with any human being, but I think some of the things that are very common are enhanced creativity, pattern recognition, a way of detail orientation. That's kind of particularly looking at autism as a use case. ADHD can oftentimes, problem solving skills, creative problem solving skills, calm under pressure because your attention threshold is a lot higher. A great CEO. It's wild because sort of like day-to-day tasks might be overwhelming, but you put an ADHD folk, and I'm generalizing here, in a crisis, and that's where they shine. So there are a lot of perks that can come with it, with the giant caveat that every human is unique.
Yes, every human is unique. I mean, you just rattled off a bunch of qualities, though, that are very valuable in the world of work, and that's just very encouraging to hear. And anyone in the audience who might be neurodivergent would probably attest to that and might be encouraged by this. You talked about external stimuli and how the neurodivergent may react to things differently. I think I learned at one point, well along my life path, I was no longer a young person anymore, that there's this thing called the vagus nerve. And at first, I guess I'll be enacting my vagus nerve when I'm at HR Technology Conference in Las Vegas in a couple of weeks. But sorry, that was a dad joke. But in any event, we have this central nervous. Yeah, that's a different vagus nerve. But there's this central nervous system that it almost has a mind of its own, and that's a gross simplification, but it reacts. It causes us to respond to stimuli and process stimuli. I think that's the right word to use differently. And that, I think that might kind of be a nice segue into our next question here. And this next piece of the topic is that, well, let me set this stage. So recruiting can be looking for a job can be stressful, right? Job seeking. And a lot of very talented people, as you just described them, with a lot of really, really good qualities that employers really need, they might find the job seeking process they might experience it differently than folks that are not we're all unique, but who aren't maybe considered, technically neurodivergent. And so, what are some of the things about modern talent acquisition that can be daunting or dissuasive to the neurodiverse, to neurodivergent individuals? What is it about modern talent acquisition that might be causing them to give up or maybe not, present themselves as accurately as they.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
Tonight on NBC, Jimmy Fallon and Bozoma St. John host the highly anticipated new competition show.
I hired 10 creatives from all walks of life. They will be battling it out to see who can impress the world's biggest brands.
This is a huge opportunity.
This is the battle for the next big idea.
This is not play.
We're spending millions of dollars.
I'm so excited to embark on this adventure with all of you.
May the best idea win!
On Brand with Jimmy Fallon, series premiere tonight on NBC.
Possibly could, so that organizations could actually know that, hey, this is a really good candidate and we should hire this person.
Absolutely. And so I think the two areas where I've been focusing my research the most at the moment have been on the impact of job descriptions and then accommodation requirements during the interview process. And I'll start lightly on the job description, and then if it's okay, maybe even just give an example of one type of neurodivergence and how that may show up in the interview process. But I think, the reality is job descriptions are oftentimes like your first point of call with a potential candidate. And a lot of the language that we oftentimes leverage, if it's not clear, concise, specific, if it doesn't call out or distinguish between requirements and nice to haves, it may cause folks to just automatically disqualify themselves because what the job that needs doing is too ambiguous, or the certain neurodivergents will sort of see it as like, I can either do all of these things or I'm not qualified, so they won't even apply. So I think that's something that we can start to take a look at, like removing jargon from job descriptions and just being really clear and concise. Avoiding lengthy lists that might be like of requirements that might be overwhelming to somebody, especially if not all of them are actually requirements of the job. The area that I think probably, let's say you make it past that first barrier and there's probably a higher tolerance threshold for what you find in the job description, the interview process is probably where folks get disqualified. Qualified folks get weeded out unintentionally the most. And I'll give just kind of an example of someone with ADHD. Let's say they're moving forward in a technical interview. An ADHD candidate might struggle with time management and find it difficult because executive function is oftentimes a subset. As an ADHD brain can oftentimes function its best like on its own schedule and in time blocks of productive work for them. And so they might struggle to complete tasks under a strict time limit. So if you offer a more flexible interview process, such as allowing the candidate to work through problems at their own pace or providing additional time for certain tasks, it can help ensure that the candidate's skills are actually accurately assessed. We also see this come forward with behavioral interviews. A lot of what folks are looking for in behavioral interviews will automatically disqualify many autistic candidates who are very qualified for the role because they struggle with things like confidence, eye contact. There's a lot of sensory processing there that might trigger, oftentimes, that may trigger high anxiety levels that kind of create a cognitive shutdown and don't allow folks to put their best foot forward. So I would say that interview process and allowing folks to maybe kind of having a couple of different interview journeys, and allowing folks to choose their own adventure is something that we can explore in greater detail as an industry.
Choose your own adventure. That's that harkens back to my childhood. I loved those books, and I would read every potential adventure. I'm probably not the only one, but you mentioned in the job descriptions piece, all of that makes a lot of sense, by the way, and we really have our work cut out for us in talent acquisition too. And it sounds like that some neurodivergent individuals may have a heightened, might be afflicted with a heightened case of imposter syndrome, maybe, because that's something we hear about a lot, right? So that might be something that that is even more prevalent or prominent in their mind than with others. You mentioned the paths that, so hiring, interviewing, right? That's another interesting area because it's true. An autistic individual might be really, really, really good at, I don't know, I don't want to sound too stereotypical, but coding, computer coding, because they can really, really, really focus, deeply, deeply focus narrowly on something. I am no expert in autism, but that's one thing I've read about them. And so they might, falter in an interview because maybe they don't recognize social cues that others do. But if you're hiring for a role, that requires that deep, undivided attention, and honestly, an ability to solve those types of problems, then man, that autistic individual that you might even not even realize that they're on the spectrum, that might be just the person for the role. There's so many things.
One thing to add
Go
to
ahead.
that, because, and I think this comes back to the choose your own adventure and element of this, because I think there unfortunately are a lot of stereotypes about how certain types of neurodivergence manifest themselves. The vast majority of research has been conducted on how males present with most types of neurodivergence, and for women, it's complete. So I'll be completely transparent. I am autistic ADHD, so both of those things live in my brain and oftentimes fight with each other, which gets real fun. But I think there is an existence of hypersensitivity or hyposensitivity to stimuli that exists across that autism spectrum. So an autistic person may be so sensitive to your micro expressions or body language or tonality that they are afraid to engage with you because there is cognitive dissonance between what your face says and the words that are coming out of your mouth. And that happens a lot more with female autistics than it does with male autistics. So there's so much to consider, and there's never going to be a way that you can, like, unless you're going to go be a neurobiologist, you're not going to master all of this. I think the core is just understanding that these are human beings that we're working with, all with their own lived experiences and internal thought processes and comfortability with disclosing that they may be neurodivergent. So the more we can curate candidate experiences designed to mitigate anxiety and stress in the majority of situations, the more we sort of cater to not inadvertently excluding anyone.
Yeah. You bring up a lot of good points, and if I had to do it all over again, I might be a neurobiologist to look into this. It's fascinating. What's the one thing? Maybe if you could leave our audience with a thought here. Where can if they can do just one thing, if an organization could do just one thing to get the ball rolling on being more accommodating to the neurodivergent in their talent acquisition process, where can they start?
I would say audit your candidate experience end to end, and just ask yourself honestly if it is a compassionate experience. Is it designed more with the employer in mind or the candidate in mind? And answer that question honestly, what you're trying to accomplish with that experience. I think that's a great place to start.
Well, that's wise advice, and help organizations with all their potential new hires, not just the neurodivergent. Thank you so much, Ashlie, for joining us today. This is a fascinating topic, and I hope to have you on the podcast again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brent.